The morning rose over the quiet town wrapped in a veil of soft mist and golden light spilling through narrow lanes and trembling leaves, and among the whispering houses stood a girl with a face so calm that even the wind paused before touching her hair. Her name was Lena, and her smile was the kind that could hold 1,000 suns, yet behind that gentle curve lay a story that no one dared to know, for she carried within her eyes the echo of something lost, something too tender to be named. She moved through the day like a breath of music, her steps light on the cobblestones as if afraid to wake the sleeping memories that followed her like shadows, and when she laughed it was like the ringing of distant bells, a sound so fragile it could break if one listened too closely. She would sit by the window of the old bookshop, her fingers tracing words she never spoke, her lips curved in quiet wonder while her mind drifted far beyond the horizon where forgotten things waited. She was the kind of girl people remembered without knowing why. The baker greeted her each morning, the painter tried to capture her in light, and still none could hold the secret that lingered behind her smile. For when the sun dipped low and the colors melted into dusk, her eyes changed. They grew heavy with something deep, something like sorrow dressed as peace, and she would walk to the edge of the town where the trees stood like silent watches. There she would whisper to the wind, and the wind would carry her words away across the fields. No one knew what she said, but the earth seemed to listen. The leaves trembled and the shadows leaned closer as if they too had hearts that could ache. In her small room the walls held photographs of faces that blurred with time, one of them a young woman whose smile was almost the same yet softer, gentler, and her eyes mirrored Lena's like a reflection caught between worlds. Sometimes Lena would sit before that picture, her hand resting over her chest, and she would breathe slowly as though trying to remember the rhythm of another life. She often dreamed of rain, not storms but soft rain that smelled of lilies and smoke, where someone called her name through the haze and she would turn but see only light. She would wake, then her pillow damp, her heart beating as though it had been running from something unseen. In the market they said she was strange, too quiet, too kind, too alone, but no one ever spoke unkindly, for there was something sacred about her sadness. It was not heavy but delicate, like a thin glass that shimmered when touched. She helped the old woman by the fountain, carried water for the children, and always thanked the sky for every cloud she passed. Yet inside her chest was a silence that sang, and though her lips smiled, her soul whispered to a memory that would not let go. On one such evening the air was thick with the scent of rain, the kind that falls softly before night fully wakes. She stood under the old oak tree by the river, her hands clasped as though in prayer. The reflection of the water flickered like broken glass, and in it she saw not her own face but another, a familiar shadow that smiled back with eyes full of unspoken words. Her breath caught, her heart trembled, and she whispered, "Please, not again," and the wind answered with a sigh that brushed her cheek like a hand she once knew. Night deepened, slowly wrapping the town in a hush of forgotten stories and silver dreams, while Lena stood still by the river, her gaze fixed on the trembling reflection that had already vanished like smoke. She felt the air thicken around her, the smell of rain mingling with the faint perfume of jasmine carried from some unseen garden. Her fingers brushed the damp bark of the oak as though it might speak back to her and tell her that what she saw was only light, only illusion, but deep inside she knew that shadows never lie, they only wait. She turned back toward the narrow path that led home, her bare feet silent on the earth. The lanterns flickered in distant windows like eyes that watched but never spoke. She moved through them like a ghost, belonging everywhere and nowhere. Her hair clung to her face, the mist kissing her skin with the memory of tears she did not know she had shed. When she reached her room the candle still burned on the table, a small fragile flame fighting the breath of night. Beside it lay a letter, untouched, yellowed with time, sealed with a ribbon now faded to gray. She sat beside it for a long while, tracing the edges with her fingertips, afraid to open it yet unable to let it be, for that letter had belonged to her mother, the woman in the photograph whose smile she wore each day like a borrowed mask, the last thing her mother had written before disappearing into the storm many years ago. Lena had been only a child then, too young to remember but old enough to feel the emptiness that followed. The world had told her her mother was gone, that storms take what they want and leave silence in return, but deep down she always felt a pulse, a whisper that her mother was not gone, only hidden, and that one day the wind itself would bring her back. She leaned closer to the candlelight, her lips trembling. She could almost hear her mother's voice, soft like twilight, calling her name in that same way it did in her dreams. Lena, she would say, smile for me, always smile, and she did. She smiled through everything, even when her heart forgot how one night when the moon was nothing but a thin thread she heard a knock at her door, faint as breath. She froze, her eyes widening. She never had visitors, not this minutes late she opened the door and found no one, only the scent of lilies and rain drifting into her room, the same scent from her dreams. She stepped outside and the world seemed to shimmer, the air alive with quiet movement, shadows rippling like silk beneath the street lamps. She followed them through the lanes, past the sleeping shops, to the hill that overlooked the river, and there she saw her, a figure standing beneath the willow, her dress flowing like mist, her face half hidden but her eyes bright with the same light that had haunted Lena for years. It was her mother, though changed, softer and distant like a star seen through water. She did not speak, yet Lena heard her voice inside her chest, a low melody of memory and sorrow, the words not words but feeling, a warmth and ache all at once. Lena reached out but her hand passed through the air. The figure smiled and whispered, though without sound, "My child, my shadow, my smile," and then she was gone, leaving only the scent of rain and the echo of a lullaby. Lena sank to her knees, her hands trembling, her smile breaking under the weight of what she knew. She had been smiling all her life to hide her mother's absence, and now that the truth had come to her, she felt the shadow of that smile fall away, revealing the raw light beneath. She stayed there until the dawn came, painting the sky with soft fire, her eyes red, her lips still curved, though not in joy but peace. She walked back home, her dress soaked, her hair tangled, but her heart calm. In her room the letter lay open, the ribbon undone, though she had never touched it. The words inside glowed faintly in the morning light, and though the ink was old she could still read them. "My dear Lena, never be afraid of the shadow behind your smile, for it is only me, watching, loving, living in every light that touches you." Part 3. The morning slipped gently into her window, brushing her face with gold, as if to wake not her body but her soul, and Lena rose slowly from the quiet floor, her heart still echoing with the whisper that had lived in her dreams. She touched the letter again, the paper soft as breath, the words shining faintly before fading back into silence. She folded it carefully and placed it by the photograph, the one where her mother's smile lingered like sunlight trapped in glass. The house around her seemed different now, lighter, freer, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. She stepped outside, the sky stretched wide and blue, the kind of blue that promises beginnings rather than endings. She walked down the path where dew clung to the grass, her fingers grazing the air that felt new and clean. The townspeople greeted her as always, the baker with his flour-dusted grin, the painter with his trembling brush, but they noticed something they could not name, the way her eyes glimmered, not with mystery anymore but with knowing, a gentle certainty that softened even her silence. She smiled at them still, but this time it was real, not a mask, not a shield, just truth shining through the fragile edges of her being. She helped the old woman by the fountain again, poured water for the children who laughed as it splashed their hands, and for a moment she forgot sorrow, she forgot loss, and only felt the hum of the world breathing with her. When dusk came she walked once more to the river, the same place where the shadow had spoken. The water was calm, the oak tree strong against the twilight wind, and in the soft ripples she saw her reflection, unbroken whole, yet behind her face another shimmered, not as a ghost now but as light intertwined with hers, her mother's eyes blending into her own, her voice carried in the breeze saying softly, "I never left, I was only waiting for you to see." And Lena understood that the shadow behind her smile had always been love, hidden by grief, shaped by silence, but alive as long as she remembered. She closed her eyes and let the wind circle her hair. She began to hum the same lullaby that had followed her since childhood, its melody tender and endless, as if time itself had paused to listen. The river mirrored the sky, now full of stars, each one a small memory floating in stillness. She lay on the grass and whispered thank you, not to anyone in particular but to everything, to the air, to the rain, to the mother who had become the shadow of her strength. The moon rose higher, soft silver on her face. She no longer feared the darkness, for it had become her companion, her teacher. Her home days turned into weeks, and Lena kept living quietly yet differently, her laughter deeper, her silences warmer. She painted the river once with colors that shimmered like whispers and hung it in the bookshop window where children stopped to stare at it, their reflections mingling with her painted water. The painter asked her one day what inspired it, and she said softly, "The shadow behind a smile," and though he did not understand he nodded as if he did, for her words carried peace that no explanation could match. As seasons changed, the town forgot the girl who smiled with sorrow and learned to love the woman who smiled with truth. The oak tree by the river grew stronger, its branches heavy with blossoms, and whenever the wind moved through them it sounded like quiet laughter. Some said it was only the breeze, but others swore they heard two voices intertwined, one young and one older, echoing softly through the night, and if anyone stood long enough by the river they would see in the water a flicker of two faces, both smiling, both shining together like light and shadow woven into one.